There was a day during the Cold War when the most heavily defended airspace on Earth was quietly outmatched, and the Soviet Union knew it. Deep inside a reinforced radar bunker, a Soviet operator stared at his screen as a signal tore across it at a speed no interceptor could match. Generals were notified, fighters were scrambled, missile crews stood ready. But before anyone could react, it was gone. Not shot down, not turned away, gone. What they had just detected was not a glitch, not a malfunction, not an error in their system. It was an American aircraft flying so high and so fast that the laws of response simply could not catch it. And in that moment, without firing a single shot, the United States proved something extraordinary. The sky itself had tilted. There are moments in history when a nation does not fire a weapon, does not declare an invasion, does not issue a threat, and yet still demonstrates unmistakable dominance. During the height of the Cold War, while the world lived under the shadow of nuclear annihilation, the Soviet Union prided itself on its vast air defense network, its interceptor fleets, and its missile shields stretching from Eastern Europe to the Arctic Circle. Soviet commanders believed that nothing could enter their monitored airspace without being challenged, tracked, and if necessary, destroyed. But then something appeared on their radar screens that forced even the most disciplined officers to question what they were witnessing. It moved faster than logic allowed, higher than their interceptors could comfortably reach, and with a confidence that suggested it feared absolutely nothing. That moment, repeated again and again throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, was when Soviet radar detected the American SR-71 Blackbird and realized they were facing something entirely beyond their reach. Inside Soviet radar installations, often buried beneath reinforced concrete and surrounded by snow-covered forests, operators worked in dimly lit rooms filled with the hum of electronics. They were trained to detect patterns, to interpret signals, to differentiate between noise and threat. NATO reconnaissance flights were common enough, and occasional intrusions were part of the dangerous choreography of superpower rivalry. But the readings associated with the Blackbird were different. The speed calculations seemed wrong. The altitude seemed exaggerated. Initial assumptions pointed toward equipment malfunction. No aircraft should sustain Mach 3 for extended periods. No pilot should be able to operate effectively at altitudes exceeding 80,000 feet. Yet the signal remained steady, deliberate, controlled. And then, as intercept orders were relayed and fighter squadrons scrambled into the sky, the object would vanish beyond pursuit range, leaving behind only frustration and disbelief. To understand why this was so unsettling for the Soviet Union, one must understand the psychological battlefield of the Cold War. This was not merely a contest of weapons, it was a contest of perception. Each side sought to project strength, technological parity, and strategic control. The Soviets invested enormous resources into surface-to-air missile systems designed to counter high-altitude threats after the embarrassment of earlier reconnaissance intrusions. They refined radar arrays, expanded early warning networks, and deployed advanced interceptor aircraft such as the MiG-25, specifically engineered to challenge fast, high-flying targets. Their doctrine emphasized layered defense, redundancy, and rapid response. And yet, despite all of this preparation, the SR-71 consistently demonstrated that it operated in a realm where conventional defensive logic began to break down. The Blackbird itself was the product of a uniquely American blend of urgency and ambition. Developed by Lockheed's Skunk works under intense secrecy, it emerged from a recognition that traditional reconnaissance platforms were increasingly vulnerable. The earlier U-2 incident had proven that altitude alone was not enough. If an aircraft could be tracked and targeted, it could eventually be brought down. The solution was radical in its simplicity. Create a machine so fast and so high that interception would become mathematically impractical. Engineers turned to titanium, a material difficult to source and notoriously challenging to work with, yet capable of withstanding the extraordinary heat generated by sustained supersonic flight. They designed engines that functioned almost like hybrid turbojet ramjets at high speeds, adjusting airflow dynamically to maintain stability beyond Mach 3. The aircraft's distinctive shape reduced radar cross-section not through invisibility, but through intelligent deflection and speed. It was less about hiding and more about overwhelming the response window. When Soviet radar stations first began encountering consistent high-speed returns matching the Blackbird's profile, internal assessments became urgent. Commanders demanded data. Analysts recalculated intercept times. Pilots were briefed on engagement scenarios that pushed their aircraft to absolute limits. The MiG-25, one of the fastest interceptors in the Soviet arsenal, was capable of impressive bursts of speed, but sustaining the climb required to approach 80,000 feet placed immense stress on engines and airframes. Even when Soviet fighters achieved partial altitude parity, the SR-71's speed advantage meant that the engagement window was measured in seconds. Missiles launched from extreme ranges struggled with guidance challenges against a target moving at such velocity. The SR-71 pilots were trained not in evasive aerobatics, but in throttle discipline. When warned of a missile launch, they simply accelerated. Speed was not a tactic, it was a shield. For American audiences reflecting on this era, it is difficult not to feel a sense of awe at the scale of engineering confidence involved. At a time when global annihilation seemed a genuine possibility, American designers and test pilots were pushing the envelope of aeronautics in ways that bordered on science fiction. The SR-71 cruised at altitudes where the sky darkened toward black, where the Earth's curvature was visible, where atmospheric density thinned dramatically. Crew members wore pressure suits resembling those of astronauts, acknowledging that they operated at the edge of survivable flight. Every mission required meticulous planning, aerial refueling, and coordination across continents. And yet, despite the risks, the aircraft maintained an extraordinary safety and mission success record, particularly in hostile proximity operations. What truly amplified Soviet concern was not simply that the Blackbird could fly fast, but that it could collect detailed intelligence while doing so. Its sensor packages captured high-resolution imagery of military installations, airfields, missile sites, and naval deployments. In a geopolitical environment defined by suspicion, knowledge was leverage. Each successful SR-71 mission reduced uncertainty for American planners while increasing it for Soviet counterparts. The implicit message was unmistakable. Even behind layers of secrecy, even beneath camouflage and deception, the United States possessed the capability to observe. And there is something profoundly destabilizing when realizing that your adversary can watch your preparations while remaining untouchable. As the years progressed, Soviet efforts to counter the Blackbird intensified. Research initiatives explored new missile designs, improved radar processing, and refined interceptor tactics. Engineers studied flight envelopes and theoretical engagement zones. Training simulations attempted to compress reaction times. Yet the fundamental constraint remained physics. Closing on an aircraft traveling over 2,000 miles per hour at extreme altitude required near-perfect timing and positioning. A slight delay in detection translated into dozens of miles of separation. Even if radar systems locked on, guiding a missile through the thin upper atmosphere against such a fast-moving target presented enormous technical hurdles. Repeated attempts yielded no decisive breakthrough. The Cold War, at its core, was a prolonged test of endurance, ingenuity, and national will. In that context, the SR-71 became more than a reconnaissance platform. It became a symbol. It embodied the idea that technological superiority could deter confrontation without direct combat. The aircraft never needed to fire a weapon to assert its presence. Its very existence altered calculations within Soviet planning rooms. Resources had to be allocated, defensive postures adjusted, psychological space conceded, all because a sleek black aircraft routinely demonstrated that it operated beyond interception. There is a quiet pride in recognizing that the Blackbird was never lost to enemy fire. Despite flying missions that skirted hostile borders and probed sensitive regions, it returned again and again, its titanium skin bearing the marks of heat but not defeat. For American observers, that record is not merely a statistic, it is a testament to a design philosophy that prioritized innovation over intimidation. The aircraft did not posture, it performed. It did not threaten, it observed. And in doing so, it shifted the balance of informational power during one of the most dangerous standoffs in modern history. When the Soviet Union eventually dissolved in 1991, many of the radar stations that once tracked the Blackbird fell silent or were repurposed. The ideological confrontation that had defined generations